The Death of Gwen Stacy. Spider-Man swung across New York when his worst nightmare unfolded. The Green Goblin, perched on his glider, hurled Gwen Stacy off the George Washington Bridge. Peter Parker reacted instantly, firing a web to catch her before she hit the water. For a short moment, he believed he had saved the woman he loved, until he pulled her up and realized she was lifeless. The sudden stop had snapped her neck. In that single panel, Marvel shattered the illusion that superheroes could always protect the ones closest to them. Gwen had been Peter's anchor, the one who kept his double life steady. Losing Uncle Ben had taught him responsibility, but losing Gwen proved that responsibility did not guarantee happy endings. The moment cut so deep that Spider-Man comics were never the same again. Readers flooded Marvel with letters, many angry, some heartbroken, all recognizing that something fundamental in comics had shifted. Writers later marked this as the unofficial end of the Silver Age of comics. Before Gwen's death, superhero stories leaned on optimism. No matter how dire things became, good usually triumphed, and loved ones were rarely lost. After Gwen fell, comics embraced a harsher truth. Heroes could fail, and failure carried permanent scars. That moment pushed the industry into the darker, more complex Bronze Age. For Peter, the guilt never faded. Every time he saw Norman Osborn's face, every time he swung past that bridge, Gwen's death haunted him. It became the tragedy that defined Spider-Man more than any victory against the Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus ever did. Crisis on Infinite Earths. In 1985, DC Comics decided to pull the trigger on its biggest gamble yet. Decades of tangled timelines, duplicate heroes, and parallel universes had piled up until the DC multiverse was so confusing that new readers could barely keep track. Their solution became one of the most devastating events in comic history: Crisis on Infinite Earths. The story began with the Anti-Monitor, a cosmic being born from antimatter who set out to erase every parallel universe one by one. As worlds crumbled, heroes and villains from across the multiverse gathered for a last desperate stand. It was a true everything-on-the-line crossover, uniting Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Green Lantern, and countless others from different Earths who had never even met before. And the casualties piled up. Supergirl fought the Anti-Monitor directly, unleashing everything she had to protect her cousin Kal-El. Her sacrifice saved Superman, but the battle cost her life. Readers saw her body in his arms on the cover of issue number 7, one of the most famous images in comic history. Then came Barry Allen, the Flash, who gave his life by running into the Speed Force to destroy the Anti-Monitor's antimatter cannon. He disintegrated into nothing, his sacrifice echoing through DC Comics for over 2 decades. By the time the dust settled, the multiverse was gone. All of DC's parallel worlds were merged into a single Earth. Countless characters vanished, timelines were rewritten, and decades of continuity were wiped clean. For longtime fans, it felt like the comic universe that they had grown up with had been destroyed before their eyes. Crisis on Infinite Earths was brutal, ambitious, and completely transformative. It reshaped DC Comics forever, proving that sometimes the only way forward was to burn everything down. The Dark Phoenix Saga. In the late 70s and early 80s, Marvel's Uncanny X-Men was hitting its stride. At the heart of it was Jean Grey, who had bonded with the Phoenix Force, a cosmic entity of unimaginable power. At first, the Phoenix seemed like an evolution. Jean was stronger, wiser, and more in control than ever before. But that power had no limits, and slowly it began to consume her. Manipulated by the villain Mastermind, Jean's mind fractured. The Phoenix fully took over, transforming her into the Dark Phoenix, a force of destruction that no one, not even her closest allies, could contain. Her power surged beyond comprehension. She wiped out the alien Debari star system, casually extinguishing an entire planet and its 5 billion inhabitants. That moment turned her from a beloved teammate into a galactic threat. The X-Men tried to save her not just from her enemies but from herself. Their battles stretched from Earth to the stars, leading them into direct conflict with the Shi'ar Empire, who demanded that Jean be executed for her crimes. In a desperate final stand on the moon, the team fought against impossible odds to protect her, believing there was still a chance to bring Jean back. But Jean knew the truth. She could not fully control the Phoenix, and every moment she lived risked another catastrophe. In her last act of clarity, she activated an ancient weapon and ended her own life, dying as Jean Grey rather than living as Dark Phoenix. Her death stunned readers. The X-Men were left broken, the universe scarred, and Marvel had created one of its most iconic tragedies. The Dark Phoenix Saga became the blueprint for how comics could mix cosmic scale with deeply personal sacrifice. The Killing Joke. In 1988, Alan Moore and Brian Bolland created one of Batman's most infamous stories, The Killing Joke. It began with the Joker escaping yet again, but this time his plan targeted Batman's closest allies in the most personal way possible. The Joker arrived at the Gordon family home where Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, answered the door. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck her spine, paralyzing her instantly. The Joker then photographed her bleeding on the floor, images he later used to torture her father, Commissioner Gordon. Barbara survived, but her life as Batgirl ended that night. While Gordon was kidnapped and dragged to an abandoned carnival, the Joker subjected him to a twisted psychological assault. Naked, beaten, and forced to watch images of his injured daughter, Gordon was pushed to the brink. Joker's philosophy was simple. All it took was one bad day to break the most moral man alive. He wanted to prove that anyone, even Commissioner Gordon, could be driven insane through suffering. Batman eventually tracked Joker down, freed Gordon, and confronted his nemesis. Gordon, remarkably, refused to break, insisting Joker be brought in by the book to show that law and order could not be corrupted. The final showdown ended with Batman and Joker face to face in the rain. After a tense exchange, Batman reached out, offering to rehabilitate Joker. For a moment, Joker laughed at the absurdity of it, and Batman laughed with him. The story closed on an ambiguous panel that left readers debating what Batman did in that final moment. The Killing Joke became legendary and controversial. Barbara Gordon's shooting was criticized as an early example of the women in refrigerators trope, where female characters suffered trauma to push male stories forward. Yet it also redefined her. Barbara later became Oracle, a hero of a different kind. Still, the brutality of this story left a permanent scar on Batman's world. Infinity Gauntlet. In 1991, Marvel published The Infinity Gauntlet, a cosmic-scale disaster that shook its entire universe. At the center was Thanos, the Mad Titan, obsessed with death itself, not the concept, but the actual female embodiment of death. To prove his devotion, he gathered the 6 Infinity Gems, mounting them onto his gauntlet to wield absolute power. With a single snap of his fingers, Thanos erased half of all life in the universe. Heroes, villains, civilians, gone in an instant. Entire planets emptied. For readers, it was shocking. Beloved characters like Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Captain America were suddenly out of the picture. The surviving heroes scrambled, but facing a god was never going to be a fair fight. The Silver Surfer, Adam Warlock, and a handful of Earth's remaining champions made their desperate stand. One by one, they fell. Thor, Hulk, and even cosmic beings like Galactus were no match for Thanos' power. The Titan crushed them with casual ease, reshaping reality at his whim. For a short time, he even ascended to become the living embodiment of the universe itself, leaving his physical body behind like a discarded shell. But that arrogance became his undoing. Nebula, his vengeful granddaughter, seized the gauntlet in a moment of distraction. Adam Warlock eventually wrestled control of the Infinity Gems and restored what had been lost, but the scars remained. Thanos vanished, choosing exile over defeat, though his obsession with death never ended. The Death of Superman. In 1992, DC Comics delivered a story that stunned the world, The Death of Superman. It began with a monster no one had seen before, Doomsday. A hulking figure in a green containment suit, he tore his way out of the earth and started marching across America. Every step left destruction behind, and no hero who tried to stop him could slow him down. The Justice League fell quickly. Booster Gold, Blue Beetle, Guy Gardner, all were crushed in minutes. As the chaos reached Metropolis, Superman became the last line of defense. The battle stretched across the city, with each punch shaking skyscrapers and leaving civilians running for their lives. Readers flipped page after page of nothing but raw, brutal fighting. Finally, the two titans collided in front of the Daily Planet. Each blow took more out of them until there was nothing left to give. In the final moments, Superman summoned the last of his strength, trading punches with Doomsday until both collapsed. Lois Lane rushed to his side as Metropolis fell silent. Superman's cape fluttered in the wind, torn and draped like a flag over the rubble. For the first time in comic history, the Man of Steel was gone. The impact was massive. News outlets covered the story as if Superman were a real public figure. Crowds lined up outside comic shops, and millions of copies sold in days. Fans cried, speculated, and mourned. Yet beneath the shock was a realization. This was the first time many readers saw death used as a headline-grabbing event. Superman eventually returned, but the story exposed how death in comics could be both an emotional gut punch and a marketing tool. Age of Apocalypse. In 1995, Marvel flipped the entire X-Men universe upside down with Age of Apocalypse. It started when Legion, the unstable son of Professor X, traveled back in time, intending to kill Magneto. His plan failed, and instead he accidentally killed his own father. That single act rewrote history. Without Charles Xavier, the dream of peaceful coexistence between humans and mutants never took root. In this altered timeline, Apocalypse rose far earlier than he should have, seizing control of the world. Humanity was pushed to the brink, cities burned, and survival meant bending to the will of a mutant tyrant. The world became a nightmare, with familiar faces twisted into darker versions of themselves. Cyclops enforced Apocalypse's rule. Beast became a cruel scientist, experimenting on helpless prisoners. Magneto, who had once been Xavier's rival, carried his legacy as leader of the X-Men, fighting desperately against impossible odds. The saga stretched across multiple titles, pulling readers into a reality that was both captivating and terrifying. Every book carried a piece of the story, the last stand of heroes who had no hope of winning but refused to give in. Among the most haunting moments was the fate of Nightcrawler, who hunted down Holocaust, or Wolverine, who in this world went by Weapon X, scarred and more feral than ever. Eventually, Bishop, the one man who remembered the true timeline, helped restore history. The universe was reset, but the Age of Apocalypse never truly vanished. Its dark imagery, twisted heroes, and ruthless storytelling stuck with fans for decades. Identity Crisis. In 2004, DC launched Identity Crisis, a story that shocked fans with its tone and subject matter. It began with a murder. Sue Dibney, the beloved wife of the elongated man, was found dead in their home. For years, Sue had been one of the few stable, lighthearted presences in the superhero community. Her death sent ripples through the Justice League and sparked a hunt for her killer. As the investigation unfolded, the story took a darker turn. It revealed that years earlier, Dr. Light had attacked Sue in the Justice League satellite and assaulted her. When the League captured him, they voted to erase his memory. Zatanna altered his mind, and to protect their secret, they also wiped memories of Batman when he objected. This revelation painted the League as deeply flawed, willing to compromise their own values to protect themselves. The mystery deepened when heroes began questioning one another, trust fractured. Green Arrow, Hawkman, and others defended the mind wipes, while others recoiled in horror at what had been done. The eventual killer was revealed as Jean Loring, Adam's ex-wife, who orchestrated Sue's murder in a misguided attempt to win back her husband. Her actions, driven by obsession, had spiraled into tragedy. Identity Crisis divided fans instantly. Some praised its willingness to drag superheroes into morally gray territory. Others condemned it for exploiting characters, particularly Sue and Barbara Gordon, as tools of trauma. The miniseries left the Justice League forever changed, tarnished by secrets that could never be fully buried. The fallout was brutal. Trust between heroes cracked wide open, and the innocence of the League's golden years was lost. Identity Crisis became one of DC's most controversial modern events, a mystery that uncovered more than anyone wanted to know: Civil War. In 2006, Marvel tore its superhero community apart with Civil War. The event began with tragedy. A group of young heroes known as the New Warriors launched a reality TV raid against villains in Stamford, Connecticut. Things went horribly wrong when Nitro unleashed his powers, creating an explosion that killed over 600 civilians, many of them children. Public outrage exploded, and the government responded with the Superhuman Registration Act. The act demanded that every hero unmask, register with the government, and operate under official oversight. For Tony Stark, Iron Man, this was the only way forward. For Steve Rogers, Captain America, it was a betrayal of freedom and trust. The superhero world split down the middle, with families, friendships, and entire teams forced to choose sides. The conflict escalated quickly. Spider-Man, caught in the middle, initially sided with Iron Man and revealed his secret identity on live television, a shocking moment for readers. Later, he defected to Captain America's underground resistance after realizing the true cost of registration. Meanwhile, heroes clashed in brutal battles, with brother fighting brother on the streets of New York. The climax came when Cap and his forces faced Iron Man in a showdown that tore the city apart. Cap gained the upper hand but stopped when he saw civilians caught in the crossfire. Dropping his shield, he surrendered, realizing the fight had lost sight of its cause. Soon after, tragedy struck again. Steve Rogers was assassinated on the courthouse steps, leaving the Marvel Universe stunned. Civil War was more than just another crossover. It forced fans to confront uncomfortable questions: security or freedom, order or individuality. The storyline reshaped Marvel for years, broke apart the Avengers, and left scars that defined the characters well into the modern era. Infinite Crisis. 2 decades after Crisis on Infinite Earths reshaped DC continuity, the publisher returned with Infinite Crisis, a darker, bloodier sequel that once again placed the multiverse on the brink of destruction. It began when the forgotten survivors of the first Crisis, Superman and Lois Lane from Earth 2, Alexander Luthor from Earth 3, and Superboy Prime broke free from the pocket dimension where they had been trapped. At first, their return seemed like salvation. They believed the modern DC universe had become too grim, too corrupt, and they wanted to restore what they saw as a better reality. But that idealism twisted quickly. Superboy Prime, once a wide-eyed teenager, descended into rage. His attacks left heroes broken and worlds trembling. He crushed his way through the Teen Titans, slaughtered members of the Doom Patrol and the Freedom Fighters, and left dozens of bodies in his wake. His battle with Connor Kent, the modern Superboy, ended with Connor sacrificing his life to stop him. Alexander Luthor manipulated the chaos, constructing a massive tower to merge parallel Earths and create a perfect reality under his control. The universe spiraled into all-out war, with heroes and villains colliding across cosmic battlefields. Even Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, who had been fractured and distant, were forced to unite one more time to confront the destruction. By the end, the tower was destroyed. Alexander Luthor was defeated, and Superboy Prime was imprisoned, though not before leaving a trail of devastation that fans never forgot. The DC universe survived, but its innocence was long gone. House of M. In 2005, Marvel unleashed House of M, a reality-bending event that reshaped the X-Men and the wider Marvel universe. It all centered on Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. After years of trauma, loss, and manipulation, Wanda's fragile mental state shattered. Her powers, which allowed her to alter reality itself, spiraled out of control. The Avengers and X-Men gathered to decide her fate. Some argued she needed to be killed before she destroyed everything. Others pleaded for another solution. Before they could act, reality shifted. Wanda had created an entirely new world. In this reality, mutants were not outcasts. They were the ruling class. Magneto stood as king, and humans lived as second-class citizens under mutant dominance. At first, many heroes didn't even realize anything had changed. They lived new lives with false memories, shaped by Wanda's wish to give them what they desired most. Peter Parker was married to Gwen Stacy. Carol Danvers was the world's most celebrated hero. It was a fantasy world built to give everyone happiness, except it was all a lie. Eventually, memories of the real world resurfaced, and the heroes confronted Wanda. The truth devastated her. The life she had created couldn't last, and she would never truly find peace. In her grief and fury, she whispered 3 words that tore through Marvel history: no more mutants. With that phrase, reality shifted again. Over 90% of the world's mutant population lost their powers overnight. Once thriving mutant communities collapsed, leaving only a few hundred mutants alive worldwide. It was a genocide of powers, and the X-Men were left broken and scattered. Flashpoint. In 2011, DC told a story that tore its entire universe apart. Flashpoint. It began when Barry Allen, the Flash, woke up to a world that was not his own. His mother, who had been murdered when he was a child, was alive. The Justice League didn't exist, and the world was spiraling toward destruction. This fractured reality was the result of Barry himself. Desperate to undo his childhood trauma, he had traveled back in time and stopped his mother's murder. That single act rewrote history on a global scale. Without the Flash to balance events, timelines unraveled. The world Barry landed in was brutal. Superman had never become a public hero. He was captured as a child and held underground, weak and isolated. Bruce Wayne had been the one murdered in Crime Alley, leaving Thomas Wayne as a hardened, vengeful Batman who used guns and had no mercy. Even worse, Wonder Woman and Aquaman were locked in a catastrophic war that threatened to wipe out the planet, their armies tearing across Europe with no regard for civilians. Barry struggled to regain his powers, nearly killing himself with repeated lightning strikes in the attempt. When he finally succeeded, he sought out Thomas Wayne, revealing the truth of the altered world. Together, they tried to restore history, but the conflict between Atlantis and Themyscira reached apocalyptic levels. Millions died as the war consumed entire nations. In the end, Barry realized the only way to save reality was to let go of his mother. He restored the timeline, but it did not return as it once was. Instead, it launched DC into the New 52 era, a complete reboot that rewrote decades of continuity, dividing fans and redefining the company's direction for years. Flashpoint closed one era of DC storytelling and began another, proving that even one hero's heartbreak could reshape an entire universe. And that's it. Now to you, if you had the power to erase just one of these events from comic history, not the timeline, but the story itself, which one would you choose and why? Comment down below, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more amazing videos like this one.